Hi everyone, my name is Dan Levitas, and today's software demonstration is on ezBIDS, the open cloud service for automated, validated DICOM to BIDS conversion. In addition to myself, the project consists of Soichi Hayashi and Franco Pastilli. Today's presentation will be a run-through on ezBIDS, but before that I want to quickly go over what BIDS is, just so that way we're all on the same page. BIDS stands for Brain Imaging Data Structure. It's a standardized way of organizing and labeling neuroimaging data. BIDS has been around now for several years and has really gained popularity within the neuroimaging community, primarily because it enhances shareability of data, because we're all working under the same framework now. BIDS compliant data sets are also able to be run on what's known as BIDS apps. These are software packages that are very streamlined because they only accept BIDS compliant data. So it makes them very easy to use. Now to this end, there have been a lot of DICOM to BID converters developed, and all of them to some degree require a certain level of programming knowledge, particularly command line usage. And given the vast array of neuroimaging researchers out there, not everyone's particularly proficient at programming, especially when it comes to command line usage, Linux, and things like that. And also, some people just don't want to necessarily spend the time having to learn a specific software package to perform their BIDS conversion. And this is where ezBIDS comes in, because unlike these other BIDS converters, ezBIDS does not require any programming knowledge whatsoever. And the reason for this is because it's all web-based. No Linux terminal or anything like that is required, and that's what this run-through will be about. So to use BrainLife, all you need is access to a web browser and an internet connection. For this one, I'm going to be using Firefox, and we recommend Firefox or Chrome just because that's what ezBIDS is validated on. So the website you're going to go to is brainlife.io/ezBIDS, and you should then appear on this page. From here, all you need to do is upload your raw DICOMs that go to a secure server, and then it will begin the BIDS conversion process. And during the whole process, you, the user, are able to make modifications, edits, so on and so forth, until you are ready to download your BIDS compliant data set. Alternatively, in addition to downloading your data, you can also send it to open repositories, such as BrainLife, if you so choose. In order to upload your data, you'll just go to your folder that has your DICOMs. There's no organizational structure that you need. You could have all your DICOMs in this one folder, or you could have within this folder other subfolders. There's really no way that ezBIDS requires you to organize the DICOMs. It'll be able to find them and go from there. The data set that I'm using is a small open science one from Andy's Brain Book. It's just one subject, it's only about 1.1 gigabytes, but it's good for testing purposes and has a bunch of different types of acquisition for testing purposes. Once you've selected the folder to upload, you will then just be prompted to confirm that. Once you do, the DICOMs will then be uploaded to the secure server here. The time that it will take to perform or to do this upload varies based on how large your data set is and how good your internet connection is. Again, this is a really small data set, relatively speaking, 1.1 gigabytes, but you'll be able to see the progress of how the upload is going. Once the upload is complete, DCM to NIX is then run, which converts the raw DICOMs to nifty and JSON files. And then once that's done, a quick analyzer is run in order to do a first pass, essentially, to identify the acquisitions and to fill in as much information that's required by BIDS for those acquisitions. It's meant to save you time, and again, you, the user, are able to make modifications as you see fit. Once that's all done, you'll see this text that says analysis complete. Please proceed to the next tab. And there are tabs here on the left-hand side that you will go through just to make sure that everything looks good. Here just has all the objects, or essentially all the acquisitions that it found within your uploaded data set. If you were to click on them, you'll just see some metadata, which is really not important for now. So we will now proceed to the first step, which is the data set description. Any information that is required to be filled out will have a red asterisk over here, and this other information can be filled in as you see fit. For now, I'm just going to, let's call this BIDS, And the other information I'm not going to fill in now, just for testing purposes. Once done, you can then proceed to the next section, which is the subject and session mapping. So again, this is just a one subject data set. However, normally you would see all the subjects and sessions on this page. The subject ID, ezBIDS will default to the patient name in this case. However, you can also use the patient ID, there's per birth date, or just your own ID for subjects and for sessions as you see fit. If you want to reset the subject mapping, you can obviously use the patient ID, or you can use numerical subject identification. I'm just going to do that, so it switches that to subject 01. Again, if there were multiple subjects in your data set, this mapping would be applied for all of them. This is not a multi-session data set. This was just one subject that came in one, so the session information we're just going to leave blank for now. Now, if you'd like to exclude a subject or session from BIDS conversion, you can do so by checking on a box here. If you just know ahead of time that there's something wrong about the subject, or they didn't have good performance, bad quality data, you can exclude that ahead of time, or for, say, a single session. But instead, we're just going to leave it as is, and we're just going to have everything be converted to BIDS for this subject. So once everything looks good on the subject and session mapping tab, we'll then proceed to the next section. And this is just participants info. So you can fill out information here if you want. Towards the bottom here, this information will be auto-filled if it can find that information in the DICOM header. So for this individual subject, it was a male, and the age was not specified, but again, you, the user, could change that if you so choose. If everything looks good here, we'll then proceed to what's known as the series mapping tab. Now for this, every single acquisition in the data set is examined, and essentially what happens is an acquisition will be given a unique series ID if one of its 4 DICOM fields are unique. Now these specific DICOM fields are series description, echo number, image type, and multiband acceleration factor. So if an acquisition has one or more of these unique field values, it's given a unique series ID, and any acquisitions that have those same values for those 4 DICOM header fields will then just be lumped into that series ID. So for this data set, we have 19 unique series IDs, and as you can see, some of them have multiple acquisitions, or in this case, objects. So for example, for this functional bold series ID, there are 2 objects, 2 with the bar task. And for example, with the localizer, which will be excluded from BIDS conversion because it's not part of the BIDS specification, there were 6 objects that have this specific series ID. If you click on each one, you'll be able to see a bunch of metadata as well as other information that ezBIDS provides, such as these thumbnails, and also it will, for each object, show which subject or session it pertains to. Again, this is all for the same subject. So you can do that, and again, since this is a localizer, it will not be converted to BIDS, so we exclude it. Also, there will be a little message up here that specifies how ezBIDS came to the determination of what the acquisition is, and again, if it's incorrect, you can modify it as is. Now, for acquisitions that are not excluded, you'll see some more BIDS labels here that you can modify and fill in if you so choose. If it's required by BIDS, then there will be a notification, either an error, like a warning error message, or there'll be a red asterisk telling you that you need to fill that information field in. So for example, this is optional, but you could say for this anatomical T1 weighted, for the acquisition, you could give it the acquisition label of MP-RAGE. And this information is then added to the file name once you download your BIDS data. However, I'm not going to do it for this. If this was an improper label, if you say looked at it and realized, oh, this is not actually a T1 weighted, you can go to this drop-down menu for data type and change it to the correct data type and modality. However, in this case, this is correct. Now for something, say, like a spin echo field map, as you can see, the direction label here does need to have, this needs to be filled in. ezBIDS was able to find that, but if not, you would need to input that information yourself. For field maps, the field maps can either be meant to act on functional bold images or even diffusion weighted images. So if that information is not included, ezBIDS will prompt you to do so. And again, you can look at all the metadata and the screenshot just to get an idea of what it is you're looking at. Again, here in the parentheses, this is the series description for that particular series ID. So it's a way to kind of orient you, the user, to what it is that you're looking at. The idea with the series mapping is to make as many edits and modifications here as possible, because what it'll do is it'll take this information and then apply it to all the acquisitions across all subjects and across all objects and sessions. So in other words, if one subject had series IDs 1 through 10, it would then apply all that down and then the other ones would go to the other subjects and sessions. I'll get into that in a minute, but the idea is here to try to do as many edits here just to save you more work later on. If there are any issues that need to be accounted for, again, there will be a warning or error message that will prompt you to complete the information. And then once everything looks good, you can then move on to the next section. And this is known as the overrides, and this is where all the series mapping is applied to all the acquisitions across the subjects and sessions. Again, here we just have one subject, and it's just a single session. I do want to mention here now something where that you'll see there are two section IDs. There's section 1 and there's section 2. Section is not a BIDS label in any way. This is just for ezBIDS. And what it does is that it determines where the localizers are. So in this data set, it models a subject getting in and out of the scanner. Either they had to use the restroom or maybe they pressed the squeeze ball. It doesn't necessarily matter, but the point is that they left the scanner and then came back in. So the localizers had to be rerun. And this is primarily how ezBIDS handles the field map intended for mapping, which I'll get into in a little bit. So at this level, the information from series mapping has been sent down here, and additional information such as run IDs and whatnot have also been added as well, because that cannot be done at series mapping. So then if you look at one of the field maps, you can then see that the intended for fields have now been populated. So for this spin echo field map, we have the two functional runs for that first section, the BART task and then this REST task. It does not include now the run twos, because then again, these are in separate sections. So if the participant comes in and out of the scanner, you need to rerun field maps in order to have those be acted on functional bold images or diffusion weighted images. So in this data set, we had some other field maps, so we have some magnitude and phase difference ones. So if you look at those intended for mappings, you'll see that they include the run twos here. We just go down and look at them. Single band reference acquisitions are not included and intended for. It can only be for functional bold or the diffusion weighted ones. If everything looks good here, and again, you can also exclude subject and session here if you start to notice maybe beforehand you didn't realize that a certain subject or session had some issues. You can also exclude them at this point as well. But if everything looks good, then you're able to move on. And I should also mention that you can go back and forth. If you need to go back and change something at its series level, you can do so, and the information will still be preserved. So you can go as far back as you need to and then proceed as you see fit. All right. So before we download the BIDS data set, there is the option to deface your data. And ezBIDS provides two options. There is Quick Shear, which we recommend, and PyDeface. I'm going to quickly start with Quick Shear, and I'll talk about it as it's working, because it'll probably take about a minute to finish. So here we have the original undefaced anatomical image, and over here it will display the defaced image once that's done. So I'm going to let that run at the moment here, and there'll be some information up here that describes what's going on. So ezBIDS, as I mentioned, has two ways you can do it. You can use Quick Shear or PyDeface. Now, PyDeface is generally viewed as the standard. However, we recommend Quick Shear because we found it to be very robust as well, and also works a bit faster than PyDeface. Quick Shear requires a brain mask, so we also run Robex in order to extract the brain mask and then use that to perform the quick shear as well. I should note here that at the time of recording, which is April 12th, 2021, it's only defacing the T1 weighted anatomical images. However, in the next day or two, this will be updated so that any anatomical image can be defaced. Because in the data set, there's a T2 weighted acquisition as well as a flare image. So in a little bit, in a few days, those acquisitions would also be available to be defaced as well. So again, this takes about a minute, at least in this case, it takes about a minute. However, if you have a larger data set with many anatomical acquisitions that need to be defaced, ezBIDS can run them in batches. So that way certain ones are running in parallel, and it's not just, it doesn't go in a sequential order here. So as you can see now, the defacing is done, and we now have an image of what the defaced image looks like. As we can see, the facial features have been removed, and we're also looking to make sure that the brain has been preserved, that it's not been cut into in any way. If that were the case, if the defacing was very poor or did not do a good job, then you can either try to use a different defacing method, or you could just use the original. You can just choose not to use the defaced one. However, in this case, the defaced image was good, so we're going to keep that as well. Defacing is not required by BIDS. However, if you're going to share your data either with colleagues or put it onto an open repository, it's generally recommended that you deface your anatomical images just to remove those facial features. All right. So if everything looks good, we're now ready to finalize the data. What ezBIDS will do now is it will take all the edits and modifications we've made and what it determined beforehand, and then organize it into BIDS. And at this point, you can now download your data set. So I'm going to do that here. So I'll just go to my downloads. You can also upload your data to BrainLife if you so choose. And in the future, we're hoping that data can also be sent to OpenNeuro. However, this feature has not been implemented at the moment. So it just takes a little bit of time. All right, so I'm going to, this again, depending on how large your data set is, it may take a little while for things to download. So I'm going to pause it here, and I'll come back to it once the data has finished downloading. All right, so we now have it downloaded. I'm now just going to extract it. In this case, I'll just move it to my home directory, but it can go to downloads or anywhere that you want it to go. All right. Done there, and then since I'm on a Linux system, I'm just going to use the command line here just to kind of show where the data is. Though if you're using Mac or Windows or something else, you could just click to the downloads menu and find it there. So we called this BIDS, and as you can see here, we now have our BIDS data set. We'll go into to the subject. And something I want to note is that ezBIDS also provides an excluded folder for each subject and session. This is for any acquisitions that were excluded from BIDS conversion, either because those acquisitions are not part of the BIDS specification and therefore can't be converted to BIDS, or you just are leaving them aside for some idiosyncratic purpose, but that they're not part of BIDS itself. If I were to go in there, you can just see they're really just the localizers here. And if we go to another directory, say in the field maps, we can see that all the information and labels that we specified earlier on have now been applied here. They've been organized and labeled accordingly. And that is a BIDS compliant data set. What you would probably want to do, just as a double check, is that you can go to use a BIDS validator just to ensure that everything is BIDS compliant, though it should be here as well. All right, so I do want to quickly just touch on what are some future enhancements that we are planning to do with ezBIDS. One is that we want to containerize ezBIDS into a Docker container and a Singularity container. That way that you could run this locally on a web browser. That's a future enhancement that we're looking to make. In addition, we also want to be able to allow the user to upload nifty and JSON files instead of raw DICOMs if they need to. And the reason is because sometimes the users don't have access to the raw DICOMs. Maybe a collaborator gave them some data, but it's just the nifty and JSON files from DCM10IX. So we want users to be able to upload those and then also have them converted to BIDS. So that's also a future direction and enhancement that we're looking to make. And that is the ezBIDS demonstration here. I want to thank my collaborators, Soichi and Franco. If you are interested in using ezBIDS, of course, you can use the web browser and go to the URL there. We do have a GitHub repo that we can be reached at, as well as a Slack channel, and we are on Neurostars, so we do peruse that if you have questions there. Thanks a lot for your time.